So, just before we get into all of the disgusting action set for UFC 316 on this episode, we wanted to take a moment here at the top of the show to pay what pitiful tribute we can to Jordan Breen, who passed away this week. Phil, well, what do you have to say about one of the original pillars of the MMA media landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you could come up with like a more formative figure in MMA media for me, honestly, than Jordan.
Yep.
You know, like many of us, I came up through Sherdog and then made my way to Bloody Elbow later. And yeah, I think, you know, like for me and for many other people, like Jordan was the first, like, was either the first or one of the first, like, real examples of, you know, how do you think about this sport as like as an analyst? Like, you know, how do you look at how it's functioning as a sport? You know, what do you talk about? How do you analyze the fighters? And he was just someone who you could count on to be just endlessly thrilled about all the weird, crazy stuff that was going on in the sport. And yeah, I mean, it's incredibly tragic. You know, the Sherdog Radio Network, the Beatdown After the Bell, the Jordan Breen Show, you know, they got me through some tough times in my life. I can remember, you know, times when I would just, I wouldn't have a job or anything, and then I would go into a park and I would sit down and I would listen. I would just put on, you know, Beat Down After the Bell or something like that. And yeah, just a genuinely, he's a tragic loss, both as, you know, what he was, which was like, he was just a library of Alexandria of MMA knowledge. He just knew absolutely everything, you know, about Tachi Palace and Invicta and Shuto and just any kind of like obscure tidbits of, like, the man just had the fight finder in his head and he knew all about these fights and he knew who had fought who and he knew weird stories about all of them. So yeah, that knowledge is a tragedy, but yeah, also just like his voice and the way he approached stuff. You know, he was he endlessly loved everything that was weird about MMA. He just loved all the crazy and all the sort of craziness and like all the weird people in it. And that also like led me to think about the times, you know, people have said, you know, it's a shame that he actually wasn't around, you know, later on in the sort of YouTube era. He would have been a massive star if he'd turned up, like, more recently. And to be honest, I don't know whether that's true. And I think it's because he was that incredibly just like weird, idiosyncratic guy who just, you know, danced to the beat of his own drum. I think he was, and that's one of the things, is that he was someone who was just built for that era of MMA that he covered. You know, he had that brain to be able to cover just a giant, sprawling, completely insane MMA landscape, and he loved it. And I just don't think he would have, you know, he would have worked he would have not necessarily worked, but I don't think he would have been interested in making himself fit the algorithm in the modern era. I don't think there's ever a version of Jordan Breen that would have really wanted that.
No, I think I agree. And I suppose I have a different perspective from many, or a different experience, because I have always had the feeling of being quite outside the social circles of MMA, despite having like worked in MMA media for as long as I have now. I didn't listen to a lot of MMA podcasts. A lot of people have like formative memories of listening to like Co-Main Event or Sherdog Radio and things like this. And so when I was back working with Sherdog, I was on a few like round tables with TJ DeSantis and Jordan Breen and I'm forgetting other guy's name right now.
Jack Encarnacio?
Yes. And Jack. And coming in as like, I was still pretty young and doing this at the time. And just sort of knowing the aura, the legend of Jordan Breen as one of these like original pillars and somebody who is like, it should be intimidating how encyclopedic his knowledge of the sport was.
Mm-hmm.
That was not how it felt to interact with Jordan Breen. All I can say is that from my limited exposure with him, to him before that point, he was somebody who made you feel very comfortable, was very engaging and personable on top of his wealth of knowledge and experience with the sport. And I think perfect for MMA because you and I have always strived, Phil, to ride the line between seeing this as like a cool, interesting sport and as a dumb, embarrassing carnival.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jordan was the perfect person to capture that dichotomy. He was never, despite knowing everything about it, was never so serious or straight-faced about it to not to appreciate the ridiculousness, the pro wrestling bullshit that is at the heart of this game. So
yeah, I think he loved all the ridiculousness.
Yeah,
but I think he was also, as you said, he tried to walk the line because it can be easy, I think, to just ingest insane stuff and then and for that to become your what you're
to be a weird, ironic cynic who's just in it.
Yeah, exactly. And you're just like, oh, it doesn't even matter. I've become completely insensitized to all the insane shit that's happening in MMA because I've just watched so much of it, and that's all I live for. Is just the craziness of it all. But I also I'll always think of how he talked about Jason Miller and more notably like War Machine, because War Machine was someone that I think Jordan kind of came to terms with his own love for weirdos and so on. And he was very candid about this. He said, we spoke to War Machine. They did articles on him. And, that's the risk of a freak show sport is that you look at these crazy people and you're like, look at this crazy guy. Look at all this wacky stuff that he's done. He calls himself War Machine. He's sleeping with a porn star and so on and so forth. And he talked about how he kind of, he kind of regretted that, and that's always stuck with me because it turned out that obviously like War Machine was a monster. He was an actual terrible person.
Yeah,
and that and that's always I always think of that. And it's always a balancing factor for me is that whenever someone's doing something crazy, whenever Nick Diaz or Sean Strickland or one of multiple other fighters is just like does something mad.
Right.
And people are like, oh, there is that crazy character again. It's like, it does to some extent behoove you to think that maybe some portion of you, when someone says, I've got serious mental health issues, some portion of you should be like, maybe you are serious.
Yeah. That these are human beings and that their actions and behaviors have human consequences. That you can be compassionate to them, and that part of your compassion can not just being a snide observer who just treats it all as a joke with no actual weight. Yeah.
And so Jordan definitely could have been that. He definitely could have been someone who just was a snide observer and just held everything in his head and, and just loved weird shit and was, and violence, but I don't think he was that guy.
Yep.
And I don't think he ever was. And it's an incalculable loss. to MMA.
We can't know what was going on for him in the last years when he was like not engaged or not present online with the sport in any way. But frankly, I think he was too fucking good for the current landscape of MMA.
I wasn't going to say it. Yes, he was.
It was just too interesting and real and earnest for this fucking content era of the sport, you know, which hopefully won't last forever, and we're soldiering through. But at a time when MMA really was like a wild, weird connection, a thing to connect with, he approached it on that level, but also brought a real human interest and enthusiasm, an earnest enthusiasm for it that I think already at that point was already kind of feeling refreshing.
Yeah. I'm really glad we had him on Heavy Hands, I think over COVID, and I'm really glad I got to be on the SRN like a couple of times. It's just like it was, you know, a dream for me when I was listening to those shows when I was getting into MMA for the first time.
Yep.
But yeah, irreplaceable, one of a kind.
Yep. We shall not see his like again. Rest in peace, Jordan Breen, and our regular show after this. Hello, folks, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, as always, Connor, and with me, as always, is Mr. Phil.
Hello.
Hello, Phil. How are you today?
Not too bad.
That's all I ever want to hear out of you. In fact, that's it. Don't say anything for the rest of the episode. UFC 316 is on the docket. I can feel it now in the silence that just followed that Phil is going to do a bit when I throw to him later where he doesn't say anything. Are you planning on that, Phil? I fucking knew it. Okay, so UFC, we'll try to wear him down. UFC 316 is on the docket today. Finally, Gordon Ramsay voice, some good fucking fights. Merab Dvalishvili versus Sean O'Malley 2 is the main event. I say that, and then I start to read the fights and realize they're not all that great, are they? Juliana Pena versus Kayla Harrison for the women's bantamweight title is the co-main event. It is at least a title fight. We've also got on this card, Kelvin Gastelum versus Joe Pyfer, now actually taking place in a non-shithole country, the USA. And, Phil's least favorite fighter on earth at the moment, Mario Bautista, is taking on Patchy Mix in his UFC debut. And there's a couple other interesting ones scattered across this undercard, but we're not going to talk about those. We're just going to hit those top four because I think those are the most consequential and, in a couple cases, the most interesting matchups. You know, better than last week. No denying that.
It is definitely better than last week. I mean, it's a reasonably well put together card with not the most like overwhelming main and co-main event.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really feel like Sean O'Malley warranted an immediate rematch.
No.
They obviously just feel like he's the only quote-unquote star they have in this division.
Yeah.
I mean, even though, like, is he? I mean, I guess maybe he is. And, yeah, similarly, like, women's bantamweight, Kayla Harrison is literally the only hope for this division, and it's not a real hope.
Yeah. Yep.
But, yeah, other than that, they haven't done the thing where they've just written the card off. And they've just been like, okay, we know that this is trash, therefore we're not going to put anything interesting on it at all. Yeah. They're clearly trying.
Yeah. And, you know, it does have on the prelims, like Joshua Van's fighting, as it was pointed out in the comments last week. We did kind of, miss mentioning him as one of the few young up-and-comers currently in the UFC that are worth paying attention to. So, it doesn't even end with the main card, the talent here. So that is, that's more than enough for me in the current UFC ecosystem.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's get into this main event. Merab versus O'Malley 2. We saw their first fight. Let's go ahead and revisit that as a sort of lodestone to guide us through what we can expect in the rematch. I'll start. Sean O'Malley fought bad.
Both fought bad.
They both didn't fight great, but Sean O'Malley somehow came into that fight appearing to have really no idea of what Merab brought to the table. It was a bafflingly unprepared-looking performance from the champion.
That is true, but also I didn't feel that Merab fought any better. I mean, the main thing that I struggled with in this fight, watching it afterwards, is that it's just the fight has an incomprehensible shape to me.
Mm-hmm.
Of all the many ways I might have thought this fight would have gone, and there weren't that many because it's not a very complicated fight.
Yep.
The idea that Sean O'Malley was going to have his maybe his best round in round 5.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here, man?
Yep. We called it as a two true outcome fight, and somehow they managed to cook up a third.
Yeah.
Which is a sort of indecisive fight where Merab is sort of winning by default because O'Malley is guessing and selling out on single power shots from extremely long range. And then Merab sort of, I mean, this is a thing with Merab that we have definitely touched on before. So much of the reason that he is a otherworldly great fighter is not the mechanical elements of his game.
Mm-hmm.
And also his decision making sometimes plays into that. He does have a penchant for faffing around at long range. And allowing and convincing himself that he's like a slick back foot fighter or something. There's a little bit of Frankie Edgar in Merab Dvalishvili where he knows he's fast and agile. And so he do you remember the first round of his fight with Jose Aldo?
Mm-hmm.
He did the same shit there. He starts it on the back foot and is just floating around and kind of losing. And then he's oh, I guess I should, put a pace on this guy and wrestle him in a way that only I can do. And go figure, he starts to win. Not that impressively in that case, but still, it seems like the kind of thing he should always be doing, but he can't really convince himself to always do it. Do you have a theory on why that is? I mean,
I think it's simply it's the value of closing in on people. I think that makes him do that because he's as soon as I put my hands on someone, the fight or the round is won.
Yeah.
And because then I'll simply keep a hold of him and I will keep attempting to wrestle him, successfully or unsuccessfully. It won't matter. Once I've got my hands on him, he's going to get knackered out trying to fight me off. And thus, there's no reason for me to take any risks when I'm outside.
Yeah.
And I think, I mentioned this with the previous, with, the why they combined to have such a uniquely terrible fight the last time is that, O'Malley was oh yeah, I'm going to intercept him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to knock him out. I'm going to make it look easy. And as we said, the way he fought in that fight, he had to make it look easy. And he made the fight into the fight came down to the singular interaction where Merab closed the distance and it was is O'Malley going to finish him off? Is he going to intercept him and kill him when he does it?
Mm-hmm.
And Merab managed to navigate that space a few times, but he wanted to make sure that he had, he first wanted to make sure that he had defused O'Malley's timing a bit before he went in. And then in the later on in the fight, he simply saw no reason to attack at all. He was like, I'm not going to go into the dangerous slice of zone, that dangerous slice of range of my own accord because I'm winning. And I don't need to. So, that fifth round, he's mostly just doing nothing.
Yep.
And, O'Malley's just punching him or kicking him in the gut every now and again, which, are things which would have been great ideas to do earlier in the fight. But yeah, so it just felt like he was so convinced that he could win the fight, win rounds if he closed up, that he was very leery to do it because it was such a big pivot point that he wasn't willing to go through it all that often. He wasn't willing to go through it like round after round. He wasn't willing to try it multiple times per round, and so on and so forth. Still hit a lot of takedowns when he actually went for them, including ones which O'Malley sprawled on. So, and that's the problem with this fight, is that there isn't really a lot to take away from it, apart from the fact that Serra Longo from my perspective, I think it's that Serra Longo are smart, and they should have said to Merab after that fight, fucking around in the fifth round got you into serious trouble. The way to be safe against this guy is to break him.
Am I crazy for I'm not confident in this. I seem to have a memory of them sort of instructing him to coast. Am I wrong about that, or was it just him?
I can't remember, Yeah. It's entirely possible.
Yeah. I can't listen to the audio now without it cropping up into the recording, but even if that wasn't the case, I think you're absolutely right that Merab, it's such a characteristic, like, MMA fighter kind of. I'm sure there are definitely boxers who are prone to make this mistake as well. I suppose it's just it's a classic kind of misunderstanding of like what happens when you stop trying to win a fight and start trying to just sit on the lead. Is that like all the threats and initiative and stuff that you were generating throughout the fight up to that point, what was exactly what put you in this position? And then if you then decide, well, I don't have to do anything, you may in fact start to lose very quickly. Because now you're just, you have completely removed like all the objectives from your mind and just dared the guy to beat you, essentially. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. And also on the, I don't know, like, what can you take away from that first fight other than the obvious, like, okay, even in a fight where it was largely contested at a range where he should have been superior, Sean O'Malley was pretty much exclusively waiting for Merab to close the distance and failing to guess his entrances correctly. He was like utterly incapable of stopping his takedowns.
Yeah.
Like more so than many Merab opponents, it has to be said. He looked like he came in with like, he was ready to sprawl. He was not ready for any second level from what I could tell. But even his first level takedown defense was frequently off because a lot of Merab's takedowns come as like counters to the counter that O'Malley is trying to throw. He'll come in with a feint and O'Malley will uncork some big overthrown right hand, which is a consistent bad habit of his, to just Conor McGregor style fling himself into the knockout punch, and then he would get taken down while throwing. So it didn't really matter if he had his, he's unless you're an exceptionally naturally gifted wrestler, you're going to get taken down in those positions when you're committing yourself to a strike. So like, that's why, aside from the fact of it, the first fight not really getting you juiced up to see the rematch, it's also like intellectually, like, do we need to see this? Like, I suppose there's a lot of room for improvement, but it kind of just looked like a fight where whenever Merab was trying to win, he was.
Yeah, it's hard not to look at it like that, right? I think there are strategic improvements that both guys could make. I mean, most of which are just like, be more offensive.
Yeah.
Like, O'Malley should be like lowering his level and throwing more pace and trying his utmost to push Merab back and to encourage Merab to, take time off and move away from
Absolutely.
him and so on, without, giving him the cues by massively overswinging. As I said, the last round where he's just like throwing long straight rights and snap kicks to the body, great stuff.
Hurts Merab with one of those body kicks, yeah.
Yeah. But also, Merab, you should just break him. Like, he takes him down for most of the first round, and then I think O'Malley gets out of it, and then Merab gets up and is like, I've won that round, and then just coasts for the remainder of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't do that. It's stupid. It's just stupid. Just break him.
Yeah.
Like, you should just do that to everyone. It's like, you're not technically equipped to coast. You're just not.
Yep.
But yeah, it's the simple facts of the matter is that whilst the fight itself was closer and like structured in a way that I just couldn't have imagined when we actually saw the first fight, the outcomes now seem even more like clearly defined for the true outcome fight, because you're just like, he absolutely just has to knock him out. He has to knock him out because he can't defend takedowns for shit.
Yeah.
Like, unless he's, and people don't learn that level of takedown defense between fights, at least not at that stage in their career. Not really.
No.
I mean, he doesn't look like, and again, if you look at people who suddenly develop, strong takedown defense, very, very quickly, like, Max Holloway or Demetrius Johnson, they didn't look like Sean O'Malley getting taken down before, in the fights before they got good takedown defense. Like, Demetrius Johnson, you're clearly looking like a lightning fast scrambler and a natural grappler who simply wasn't prepared for a concerted wrestling assault from like Uncle Creepy.
Yep. Maybe Alexander Gustafsson is the example O'Malley should draw inspiration from.
Yeah.
Getting ragdolled by Phil Davis and then actually being a pretty damn effective offensive and defensive wrestler for the rest of his career.
Yeah.
And
then
it's possible.
Just like going and training with Phil Davis.
Yeah. Maybe Sean O'Malley's been training with Merab.
Unfortunately, I think that is unlikely.
I've got a great sparring partner for my rematch.
Yeah. But yeah, he just doesn't look like someone who's going to pick up takedown defense.
No.
In between two fights.
Now, I will say, I think, Sean O'Malley doesn't know nothing about defensive wrestling. And I think the biggest problem for him there was more broadly strategic. Like I said, a lot of the takedowns he got hit by were when he was like over swinging on some counter shot, because he told himself basically what you're saying now, like, I have to knock him out. I have to kill him with one shot. And, I think, as I said, when we talked about this last time, if I recall correctly, like, I think the main problem with his, the ease with which Merab was taking him down there was like a lack of an actual strategic approach. Like, while I understand, with the basic sort of principle of you gotta knock this guy out to win, most likely, you can't go in there with that being like the sole idea guiding everything you do, because otherwise you're going to continually let him into range, let him set you up and trick you and get in on easy takedowns. Like, you have to do more of what, Merab allowed him to do in the fifth round, but do it more proactively. Like, put him on the back foot, keep him at bay with the jab, like make him turn. Don't just let him gallop around you, but touch him and then turn. Like you have to create a whole kind of barrier to the entry so that when he does enter, you can actually figure it out and time him. Don't just give him a blank slate of, you're really far away and I'm waiting for you. So, I mean, I think that's the change that Sean O'Malley needs to make. That's why I started this all off by saying his game plan was fucking terrible, because it essentially is no game plan. Like, I'm going to let this guy fight his fight, and at some point I'm going to catch him. That's not a strategy. Even if it does work sometimes, like, that is not a strategy. That's that's what we would call hope chess, Phil. Mm-hmm. I hope he doesn't figure out my plan. Please don't see it. Please don't see it. Please blunder. Like that's bad. That's a very amateurish way of approaching a very challenging opponent like Merab. So, like, what I would like to see here from Sean O'Malley is more measured aggression, a more thoughtful maintenance of the distance between himself and Merab. I'd like to see him actually trying to control that space by attacking Merab down the center with his straight shots. I'd certainly like to see him much more diligently working the body. We know Merab is very difficult to knock out, but that's usually the solution against guys like that. Try to hurt them to the body if you can't catch them upstairs. I need to see, like, him doing more to prepare the knockout he wants to find. Diligence.
So what you're saying is that he should be watching Conor McGregor versus Chad Mendes.
I mean, that's something. There's a fight where Conor McGregor got taken down 1,000,000 times and Chad Mendes lost because he gassed. So I'm not sure if I would want to copy paste that exactly, but there were definitely
from like a strategic standpoint.
Yeah.
McGregor was, I don't think he was prepared to fight a wrestler.
Right.
But he came out and he was just like, nope, put this guy against the fence, and then immediately just start a barrage of body shots.
Absolutely.
Just, like, digging away at him, immediately trying to put himself on the up on attritional damage.
Absolutely.
And trying to force a mistake out of Mendes, which he did.
Yeah.
Both physical and mental pressure that he had that's one of the things that O'Malley can take away from that last fight, is that he should be less scared of gassing out.
Yeah, he was still there in round 5 and did his most damage of the entire fight in that round.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And maybe that changes if he does actually try to approach the fight more proactively across the board. But still, Umar fucking gassed out, but Umar had good, principles in mind and managed to fight a really competitive fight with Merab, even when he was utterly, shattered from fatigue. I think you should be a lot more willing to embrace that than whatever that last fight was, where you just sort of consent to lose strategically. You basically take it as given that your only chance to win is a miracle, is some fucking Hail Mary counterpunch. That's just a great way to get set up by Merab's game. As weird and aimless as Merab's game seemed there, he at least correctly understood, when I'm at this range, he can't touch me, and when I get in, I'm going to be wrestling him. And Sean O'Malley did nothing to test that thinking from Merab until the 5th round. So, having seen it, how do you not pick Merab in the rematch? Yeah. That's why it's not really the best rematch I would have asked for. But hey, they're doing Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez 2 later this year, so... that's very true. This isn't even close to as bad as that. This will not be the last time that I complain about them wasting the potential of an interesting champion with needless rematches. But, you gotta pick Merab. He just, the thing is we barely even got to see anything go wrong for him, and we do know about Merab that things can go terribly wrong and he can still come back and take take over the fight again afterwards.
Yeah. He didn't. He had an extra gear that he just wasn't really using.
Pretty much. So I am curious, at least, to see what adjustments Sean O'Malley and his team, his badass cigarette smoking coach, make for this rematch, because I think they really dropped the ball in preparing for Merab last time and had a really, really short-sighted conception of the matchup, and it can really only be improved on.
Yep. But yeah, I suspect my suspicion is that we're going to get something that's very similar with like one tactical change. Like he's going to have a step knee prepared or something.
Yeah. It'll be like Junior Dos Santos' famous adjustments for Cain Velasquez.
What was that again?
Oh, he just had like one new idea. Like in their third fight, it was like exactly the same as the second. Oh, everything okay?
Yeah.
The fuck was that?
I have no idea. Something just fell over.
I thought it was your body at first. That is exactly the sound I think that your body falling over would make. Sort of a clattering of wood.
Oh, yeah, a rigid clatter. I say, someone help.
Oh, heavens. But, yeah, JDS, like, in their third fight, he had, like, up elbows. He was like, well, I'm gonna get horribly out-wrestled, but I'm gonna get him with this elbow while it's happening.
Yeah.
We need more than that from Sean O'Malley, so I hope you may be right, but I'm gonna be laughing if that's the extent of the adjustment he makes.
I'm calling it a step knee.
Yeah, step knee, elbows up when he's on his back.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that.
Yep.
Hey, you know what? It would still be an improvement over the little that he showed last time.
Yeah.
So that's our main event of UFC 316. Fortunately, it's looking up from here. When we come back, Juliana Pena is defending the women's bantamweight title, the most important title in the entire UFC, against Kayla Harrison. We're going to talk about that after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
The reviews are in, Phil, from our own episode last week. Women's bantamweight, the shittiest division in the entire UFC. But it's still...
yeah, I mean, it ain't close. But also, absolutely, shout out to the guy in the comments who was like, how dare you call us uncreative and then do a ranking the divisions episode. All you can really say is, got him.
Yeah, he got our asses.
Yep. Yeah.
Only could have
Fair
been
enough.
less creative if we'd framed it as a sort of tier list.
Oh, yeah, let's do that next time.
But hey, women's bantamweight still has a title, and it is still technically in need of defending. And they also do have, a challenger in waiting in this division in a way that, frankly, a lot of the other divisions don't. I wouldn't say that makes it particularly compelling. I've seen Juliana Pena, and I've seen Kayla Harrison, and neither inspires all that much excitement in me, but they have to fight. And now we have to talk about it.
Yeah, it's weirdly compelling in its own way.
Yeah.
Because it's a matchup between like badness.
Mm-hmm.
There's a sort of weird bottom scraping quality to the whole thing. It's weirdly. I genuinely don't know how this one's gonna pan out, because, like, on the one hand, Juliana Pena is an actual relatively well-rounded mixed martial artist who's dangerous in multiple areas.
Mm-hmm. And a crazy person, which helps.
And a crazy person, yes. I think she is not someone who's going to like quit on herself in a fight or anything like that. And who's just, who's not going to be particularly easy to just shove out of any particular phase of the fight. And Kayla Harrison hasn't really fought anyone like that.
Yep.
On the other hand, Kayla Harrison's really big, and Juliana Pena is not actually very big at all.
Yeah. It's true, and Kayla Harrison.
I'm done. This is my technical analysis for the fight.
that's all we need. I mean, on top of being big, Kayla Harrison does have a specialty at her disposal.
I guess
it just really feels like.
I mean, does she?
Well, it's a worthy question how useful that specialty is. I mean, she's a credentialed judoka who has, as far as I can tell, at least in the UFC, kind of struggled to figure out how to incorporate that into, all the other stuff you're supposed to be able to do as an MMA fighter.
Yeah.
Like, in fact, her takedown game mostly works like a wrestling game.
It doesn't even really work like a wrestling game a lot of the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think it does say, it sort of says something about, the quality of MMA coaching that or at least her coaches. I don't know if there's nobody out there who could figure this out. I suspect there aren't many, but certainly her coaches have not been able to devise for her a system which allows her to use her clinch grappling, which is what you would expect to be impressed with from a seriously skilled judoka, right? Say what you will about Edmund Terverdian. He did actually train Ronda Rousey to be an aggressive pressure boxer so that she could force her way to the clinch. She got her throws to work all the time. And not all because her opponents just blundered into range. That certainly happened too, but there was kind of a process there, thin as it was, that allowed her to work her A game.
I think also just Rousey is just a very natural, instinctive transitional fighter.
Yeah, and a naturally aggressive fighter as well, right? She liked to pressure. She liked to bully people, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, as I think I might have said, there's that I can't even remember who she was finishing at the time. I just remember it as a sequence where she's just gets someone in the collar tie, knees them, flips them on their head, and then armbar. It's beautiful stuff. She on her best day, she looked genuinely awesome when she was doing stuff. Yeah. And yeah, she there were clearly multiple elements of MMA that she clicked with.
That was Alexis Davis, I believe, is what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Really cool clinch sequence into the throw. Yeah.
Yeah, she was just there's a reason people were super excited by her, and she at least had some power and so on. Whereas Harrison she's just big. She doesn't even seem to be a particularly effective takedown threat in a division where wrestling is extremely thin on the ground. She's struggling mightily to take down people like Caitlin Vieira.
Yeah, but I think that's largely because her setups are shit.
Mm-hmm.
She's not in the range where her best takedowns operate ever. And the takedowns that she has therefore resorted to using, double leg and single leg shots, are set up by a striking game which is really stiff and sort of betrays her overall wariness of ever being it. She just comes across as really jumpy and disorganized, and so yeah, her wrestling ends up looking ineffective. When she hits a shot, it's a good looking shot. She's one of these judoka who probably did train some body lock and leg grabs, things which have sort of come in and out of the legal realm of judo techniques over the years. But I think it's the game surrounding that. Very much like the conversation we had about Sean O'Malley's attempt to counterpunch Merab Dvalishvili. Like, there was no structure to actually make these things effective. And so she just ends up looking like she's not particularly good at anything except being big, so that when she does get inside, she's difficult to get rid of.
Yep.
But a very cumbersome striker and no real sense of, the flow of striking exchanges. No sense of the time that we discussed a couple weeks ago. No sense of how she can set somebody up with a viable threat to then get into the range where she can then execute an overwhelming wrestling or grappling move. She's just kind of guessing and blundering in from way too far away. And so, yeah, even a totally formless fighter like Ketlin Vieira just started stuffing all of her takedowns after the first round, because she saw it. That was the only look. Harrison surprised her with one, and then she was like, okay, I'll watch out for that. And that was all she needed to do. I'll watch out for that one. Problem solved. That's not a good look for your credentialed takedown artist.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a few.
Basically, she ends up feeling a bit like Tatiana Suarez, but with just a much less impressive champion to be tested against.
Yeah, well, she feels like Tatiana Suarez with a much worse wrestling game and, frankly, worse striking than Tatiana Suarez.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy. So there's a bunch of different ways that this could go, right? One, stinky kickboxing match.
That'll happen.
Yeah, there's going to be a solid amount of stinky kickboxing in this.
Definitely.
Partially because it seems that that's just what Juliana Pena thinks she is now.
Yes.
Juliana Pena just clearly seems to think that she's just a really good striker.
Well, she fucking outstruck Amanda Nunes. She must be good.
Yeah. Has she figured out how to fight against southpaws yet?
That's going to be
or will she be undone by more cheating?
That will probably be a deciding factor in this fight, if I had to guess. Yep. We know she's not going to jab.
Stinky grappling match. 2, Harrison has never really fought against anyone with an actual guard or a grappling game that I know of.
Yeah.
Mostly they're either sometimes they have offensive grappling and so on, but they don't really have a guard. Pena does actually have a guard,
and
it's entirely possible that Harrison just blunders her way into a takedown and just gets armbarred or guillotined or whatever. And the third option is simply that Pena just doesn't actually have good takedown defense, and Harrison just sits on her.
Yeah, I mean, with or without a guard. Here's the thing, Kayla Harrison can handle a guard, even in the clearly still unfamiliar, uncomfortable context of an MMA fight, much more naturally than she can handle the free-flowing realm of striking. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we know, of course, that if you come in from only having done jiu-jitsu or judo or some purely grappling sport straight into MMA, then the introduction of strikes to the grappling does really downgrade your proficiency. But I still think that's got to be a more comfortable phase than the striking, in which she looks like she's totally clueless. So even with Juliana Pena maybe being one of her first opponents with a somewhat viable guard game, I gotta think having Kayla Harrison on top of Juliana Pena is going to be very bad for Juliana Pena.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Harrison herself is quite comfortable striking from top position. She's pretty brutal. And one thing you can say for a judoka, they practice pins in that sport, and pins are really good for a ground game that includes striking. that's the whole idea of pins, essentially. I mean, in the historical versions of your wrestling sports, including judo, you would have fucking weapons. And that's why pins are highly prized, essentially, is you want to get somebody on their back so you can pull out your dagger and jam it through their helmet.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of lends itself well to striking as well. And we saw this in Ronda Rousey's game, too. Another, obviously, the other famous female judoka in MMA. That when she got on top of people, she could stick them in a scarf hold or something and just hammer them very comfortably because she knew how to keep them pinned. Keep their shoulders flat on the mat. And, I think Harrison clearly has a penchant for that kind of ground and pound game. So I expect that if she can get Juliana Pena down consistently, she's gonna kind of wreck her from top position. The question is Juliana Pena gonna be capable of like making the very simple adjustments necessary to deny Kayla Harrison's like the one idea she has for taking people down at this point?
Yeah.
You know, like Ketlin Vieira managed it, but Ketlin Vieira is big and strong in a way that Juliana Pena isn't. Not that Pena's a weak, bad athlete or anything, but she's not.
She is going to look tiny against Harrison.
Yeah, she is much smaller than Vieira or Harrison. So, like, I mean, she allowed fucking Raquel Pennington to basically boss her around the cage. And, you know, it was Pennington who kind of came up with the striking adjustments. Pena was just kind of meeting her with like blind counter swings every time she stepped in. I don't know. Like, she's got such a structureless approach. Is she going to be able to stop the double leg 2, 3, 4 times?
Yeah, probably not. But also, you know, do you trust Harrison not to run out of ideas as the fight goes on? I mean, again, this is why this makes it such a fascinating match, right? Because you're like, one of these people is probably going to run out of ideas as the fight goes on. Mm-hmm. But the other one never has any ideas in their head to begin with. Like, so what are we even saying here?
Yeah.
Like, it's sort of like you said, is Juliana Pena going to adjust her way around an opponent?
Yeah.
She's just never done that.
Right.
She just kind of throws and gets mad and grapples and gets mad until something happens.
Yep.
Sometimes that's her winning, and sometimes it's her getting guillotined by Jermaine Durandamy.
Right. She didn't adjust in the fucking first fight with Amanda Nunes. She just came in with a shot that Nunes was hilariously incapable of adjusting to, and then Nunes made a broad overcorrection, which utterly baffled Pena in their rematch.
Yep.
So, I mean, yeah, like the gut feeling is Kayla Harrison being big and strong and also having a game where she is dominant over most people is probably going to win. But I also think there's a high probability that Juliana Pena is going to make her insanely uncomfortable on the feet.
Mm-hmm.
Pena is like, she has reasonably fast hands and she is just down to trade.
Yep.
And Kayla Harrison cannot like that.
Yeah, there's going to be some funny ass boxing in this fight.
She's going to do some fucking like awkward low kick and then just like throw her hands up and completely denude herself of any offensive potential as she tries to skirt away. And Pena's just going to chase her, like pumping out ugly, shifting, straight punches. Mm-hmm. Like there are going to be points in this fight where Pena terrifies Kayla Harrison. I'm pretty confident of that.
Yeah, someone reposted the gif of, I think it's the first fight, right, where Nunes drops Pena.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Describe it to me.
It's just the one where she's just sprinting after her, just like flailing arm punches, like desperately trying not to fall over her own feet pretty much as she's doing it. Just like stumbling after her in one of the most hideous blitzes you've ever seen. And then, Nunes just like lands, I think, just a short right hand counter that just like flails all her arms in her limbs in directions like she's been like you expect like rings to come flying out of her like she's Sonic the Hedgehog.
Fucking goes down Quap style.
It's very funny.
Yeah. But like that tenacity and ferociousness is totally going to scare the shit out of Kayla Harrison. Mm-hmm. And Harrison's game is like the game surrounding her grappling is so thin. God, fucking hell. What a bad division. This is a title fight?
It's got a weird kind of funny appeal to it. You're just like, man, this person's so bad. Their opponent is also really bad in a very complimentary way. Sorry, I'm watching the GIF again. It's just never not funny.
Oh, I mean the thing is I have been really unimpressed with Kayla Harrison in the UFC. Mm-hmm. I gotta say.
Yep.
She has fought, I mean, Holly Holm was fucking ancient by the time she got to her. Aspen Ladd, who is small and just all round not good. And then Ketlin Vieira gave her like a really difficult fight just by not getting taken down the same way over and over. Mm-hmm. All she needed to do was like defend the second shot after the first one worked. And Kayla Harrison was just like flapping around at range, like desperate to get inside without any idea of how to do so, and also looking so unconfident and scared in her attempts that it like bolstered Vieira's confidence. You could just tell she doesn't want to be doing this when she's on the feet. Mm-hmm. And the moment that does seem like something that's going to fuel Juliana Pena's fire.
Yep.
Juliana Pena is like the bloody nine, Phil.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She's just going to be like, enemies, corpses then. And just, you know what I mean? Like showing fear to Juliana Pena. Horrible idea. She wants blood. She wants to taste it.
I don't think the First Law would have made a good trilogy if Logan had gone berserk and then charged immediately into a guillotine and got choked unconscious. Also, please check Discord and just have a look at the GIF.
I gotta reopen Discord now for this. Yeah. Kayla Harrison hits her with a ground and pound elbow. Pain is good. Pain is the fuel that makes the fires burn. So, I'm almost tempted to pick Pena, because at least Pena's a fucking fighter in that very natural way that Kayla Harrison clearly isn't.
But, I think it would be funnier if Pena won.
Certainly.
Because then she would also have some speech afterwards where she'd just be like talking about how she's the best to ever do it.
Oh, yeah.
And no one can hang with her, and, you know, it would be awesome. But no, I'm still going to pick Kayla Harrison. She's really big.
Yep.
She's big. It's a big person.
Pena historically easy
actually,
to
no,
take
I'm picking
down.
her to miss weight and then for her to win anyway, but she can't get the
That's good.
belt. That's what this division deserves.
That's good. I like that.
Pena to get like mostly crushed, but to retain on a technicality and then have to go out and say that she's still the best, which she will do.
This fucking GIF is ludicrous, by the way.
See what I mean about the Sonic rings, right?
Splat is the sound of that knockdown. Fuck. Well, I'm going to pick Juliana Pena for a laugh.
It'll be so funny if she wins.
Like, I do think that on a completely non-technical level of analysis, there is something to the idea that as long as Pena doesn't get finished, which she very likely will, because she's going to get taken down and Harrison's going to be huge and she's going to be smashing her with elbows and stuff. But supposing that happens and then she doesn't get taken down again the same way, like, and she's just down to trade shots and eager to chase after Kayla Harrison, she's going to scare the shit out of Kayla Harrison if she's allowed to do that. She just absolutely is.
Yep, I agree.
And, the more she's, again, like if you think of Tatiana Suarez versus Weili Zhang, like from the first moment that an opponent who is powerful and aggressive actually puts that kind of fear in Kayla Harrison, the chances of her gassing out and starting to genuinely cower because she can't muster the energy to resist anymore go up exponentially.
Yep.
Like she does strike me as a fighter who, you know, I know she didn't utterly collapse against Ketlin Vieira. But Ketlin Vieira doesn't have any kind of game to actually test her once she puts a scare in her. Juliana Pena does. She's at least
she can chase people.
Yeah, she's aggressive.
Yeah, she will. Like, I mean, that's what I said. If she wins, it'll be funny as hell because it will be like just both the size disparity and the technique thing will just make it extremely funny.
Oh,
it's like,
undoubtedly.
Remember that? Were you there for that thing where people were talking about like who would win between whatever it was, like 100 people and a gorilla?
Yeah, of course.
Incredibly stupid. But and I saw at some point someone posted this response, which was like a gorilla in a zoo or a park somewhere or whatever getting chased off by a goose.
Of course, yeah.
Yes. And this will look exactly like that.
Juliana Pena is a goose.
Yes.
And
Kevin
even
Vieira lumbering in panic away from, not Kevin Vieira, Kayla Harrison lumbering in panic away from a tiny, furious Juliana Pena will look exactly like a gorilla trying to run away from a goose.
Hey, and it happens to people too. Even if a person knows there is literally no logical reason to be afraid of a goose, like you can just grab its stupid neck and fucking hammer throw it into the nearby lake with ease. It cannot hurt you. People run away from aggressive geese in parks all over the world every day. Because the geese understand that a big aggressive display has an effect.
Be the goose, Juliana.
Be the goose. Enough with trying to be the goat. It's time to be the goose. Unlock the goose within you. Within all of us, there are two geese. So, yeah. I mean, I think Kayla Harrison is obviously she's the coming woman in this division. She's the smart pick. She has an A game that when she gets to it, it tends to crush people. Juliana Pena is a completely formless, processless fighter in so many ways, but she's mean and crazy and aggressive, and she doesn't break all that easily. So I think it will be very funny and also somewhat possible that she actually beats Kayla Harrison.
Let us hope. But yes, I'm picking Kayla because she's big.
Yep. Fair enough. All right. Let's take our final break there. When we come back, Mario Bautista versus Patchy Mix, Kelvin Gastelum versus Joe Pyfer after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about Kelvin Gastelum and Joe Pyfer, a fight which was cruelly prevented from happening when it was supposed to happen by the dire state of the health codes in Mexico City food, if Joe Pyfer is to be believed.
Yes. And now he gets, I guess, some kind of Pyrrhic revenge on Mexico by being able to fight someone who is of Mexican descent.
Yeah.
Will he be able to use that fury against Kelvin Gastelum? Will Kelvin Gastelum make weight?
That's a good question. If I were him, I wouldn't try. Just come in.
It is middleweight, and it's been a while since he's missed at middleweight, right?
Yeah. He's certainly capable of it.
Yes.
That is not a disciplined pro athlete, Kelvin Gastelum. And Joe Pyfer is a big middleweight, it has to be said.
Mm-hmm.
At least Darren Till sized, and I gotta say, actually considerably better than Darren Till.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I said before, perhaps unwisely, that I think this is a somewhat straightforward fight to understand, albeit not a straightforward pick to make, because there is the distinct possibility that this will be one of those fights where Kelvin Gastelum will try to use his wrestling. And I say that only because he did it when he blew weight against Chris Curtis.
Yes, and more to the point.
Or rather,
he blew weight against
Rodriguez.
Daniel Rodriguez. Yeah.
That was the one. Chris Curtis one was mostly a fucking slobber knocker. It was the Daniel Rodriguez fight where he came in heavily overweight and then just laid all over Daniel Rodriguez once in a blue moon.
Mostly getting pieced up.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's the wrinkle, I think, to consider. Kelvin Gastelum has maybe, after long years, remembered that he came into this sport as a wrestler with an innately good feel for scrambles and back takes and things like that on the ground, and may try to leverage that and slow Joe Pyfer down. And I think if he doesn't do that, he's going to have a really tough time with Joe Pyfer, which may yet lead to Joe Pyfer not being able to finish him and getting very tired.
Yeah, that's what makes me confused about this one, because what it took to take out Joe Pyfer from Jack Hermansson was just pure aggression.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Jack Hermansson, he's got a lot of goose in him. Like,
definitely,
he is definitely never gonna give up or stop fighting. He absolutely believes and will, walk through fire to win any fight.
And given that his nickname is the Joker, I suppose that makes him a silly goose.
Okay, well done.
You got to give me that one, Phil.
Yes, that's actually a pretty good name. But do I trust Kelvin Gastelum to kind of be that guy? To be, like, relentlessly aggressive?
Again,
he was quite aggressive against Rodriguez, but mostly until he, again, started getting pieced up the whole time.
He was quite aggressive against Chris Curtis as well. I think he felt emboldened to be that way because Chris Curtis is, like, Kelvin Gastelum shaped and sized as well.
Yes.
But again, this is the thing with Kelvin Gastelum. He's incredibly inconsistent. Like, there is no... both from fight to fight and within the fights themselves. Like, who was it? Was it fucking, I hate to call the man out because I respect him, but do you remember when, like, Luke Thomas was talking about Kelvin Gastelum's head movement ages ago?
Yeah.
And it was like, cause yeah, there are some little clips you can pull of Kelvin Gastelum showing head movement. And a bunch of us annoying nerds were in his replies being like, look, I know he's capable of that, but it is in no way a reliable part of his game. It's just something he does now and then, which has very little connection to his process for winning fights. But that's the thing. Like, there are a lot of things Kelvin Gastelum can do. And on top of all of those, he is just an enduringly great athlete who has a titanium chin and, is usually pretty difficult to actually tire out to the point where he can't continue fighting hard. But he's remarkably inconsistent in the application of all these different parts of his game. The only thing that is reliable is that he's going to eat shots like nobody's business.
Yep.
That's it. And that's the only reason really that he has been that he has remained a pretty high level fighter for this long, is that he's still just unkillable. Otherwise, he's a fucking mess, and you just don't know what you're going to get. Every once in a while, he'll have a fight where you're like, oh, this made sense. It looks like he had a plan, and he executed it. Most of the time, it's, Nasrat Hakparast mode.
Yep.
Just get into a stupid brawl and try to wear the guy down by simply not going away.
Yeah. And he's definitely deteriorated speed-wise. He still has very, very fast hands, but literally everything else about his game, he is simply a short person walking slowly after his opponents, soaking up strikes until he can get into the range of his own arms.
Yep. Got no cagecraft, got no defense.
Yeah. So he's sort of he's just a recipe for in this kind of fight, he's just a recipe for a kind of not particularly thrilling fight, which will certainly be action-packed in a very monotonous kind of way.
Yes. But what happens if the pattern holds true and Joe Pyfer cannot knock his block off?
Yeah, it's very true.
Because Pyfer's got some good, first level setups. He can be kind of tricky with his rhythm. He does actually have a jab. He knows how to feint, and he can mix up his shot selection well enough to catch people really, really clean with some really powerful punches. But as we saw against Jack Hermanson, if that fails to win the fight, what we said at the time, he showed some tenacity. He showed survivability against Jack Hermanson. It was certainly not as, humiliating a, downfall as, say, Raul Rosas's first loss, where his game didn't work and then he completely collapsed. But he also, his winning chances basically went out the window.
Yep.
One way or the other. So, I don't know. I think Joe Pyfer is a remarkably powerful puncher. I wouldn't be shocked. Kelvin Gastelum's chin has to go at some point. But I've not seen any signs of it yet.
No. Also, wait a minute. Did Rodriguez just beat Kelvin Gastelum? I'm looking back at this. He smoked him so badly for the first 8 minutes or 9 minutes of this fight. And then Gastelum just landed some shots on him towards the end of the round. But again, he'd been getting apparently according to Fight Metric, he outstruck him 45-40 in the first round. That is not what happened, Fight Metric. I don't care what you are saying.
I'll have to rewatch that one, probably on a future episode of the MMA Depressed Us.
It's quite a good fight, but he's kicking the shit out of Gastelum, for long periods of time. Just, and partially, a lot of why he loses that third round and the fight, and again, I'm actually not sure that he lost that fight, is that he's just really tired from just endlessly punching the shit out of Kelvin Gastelum.
Mm-hmm.
Just combinations, getting him completely out of position, facing the wrong way, just body shots, everything. He just hits Kelvin Gastelum with everything, and at the end, Kelvin Gastelum just sits on him because he's too knackered. Which does make me feel what if that does happen again? I think I've still got to pick Pyfer.
Yeah.
Just because it's another, it's an actual, natural middleweight, a big natural middleweight. At some point, this has to stop working, right? That's all I've got. That's all I've really got.
Yeah.
It's just, at some point, just face tanking your opponent's shots when they're a giant puncher.
Yep.
Has to stop working? Question mark?
Yep. It's, like I said, it's sort of simple parameters to the fight, but it doesn't necessarily make the pick all that easy. Because in a lot of ways, it's a much easier proposition for Joe Pyfer than the clever, tricky, well-rounded Jack Hermanson, who was still, somewhat close to his prime at the time. Certainly hadn't shown any signs of slowing down, but it's also there's elements of Gastelum's game which are just cheating.
Yep.
And I have yet to see Joe Pyfer beat somebody who can suffer the worst of his game and just not lose immediately. I'm not really sure what the second stage of Joe Pyfer, like, how does he retain control of a fight if he like fucking blows his wad trying to take the guy's head off in the first round and fails to finish him? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe it won't matter because Gastelum will come in with no plan at all.
Yeah.
We'll just...
I mean, that's the thing is that, like, if Pyfer has been like, has been really determined to be like, oh, I'm going to be in a 3-round fight and I'm going to do my absolute best to make sure I do not gas out and I'm going to be as prepared as I can possibly can be. If he comes in with that kind of attitude, there is just an entire possibility that this just could be like 15 minutes of just a horrifically ugly beating.
God, capital T technical Joe Pyfer. Imagine that.
No, I mean, what if he just comes like ready to just go for 3 rounds and it's just 3 rounds of Kelvin Gastelum just getting brutally destroyed.
Well, yeah, that I suppose that could definitely happen.
Like just the fight that Kelvin Gastelum had against Daniel Rodriguez, but just against someone who's even bigger.
Yeah. Much bigger, and also a much better athlete. Daniel Rodriguez is one of the slowest top-level fighters in the entire UFC.
Mm-hmm.
Not an athlete by any definition of the term. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm going to pick Joe Pyfer for sure. I am curious to see what happens and just all the sort of default tests that Kelvin Gastelum can offer. How Joe Pyfer handles those. I think even if Gastelum shows up with no plan and out of shape and has no tricks up his sleeve at all, I will still be curious to see how Pyfer handles the prospect of having to continue to beat a guy up for 3 rounds.
Yep.
That's something.
Yep. How do you deal with the unkillable?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, both of us picking Joe Pyfer. Let's move on to our final fight here then. Mario Bautista. I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you remember him, Phil. He he had a really impressive performance against Jose Aldo, who would not go on after that to lose any less impressive performances to less impressive fighters. And he is taking on the UFC debutante Patchy Mix, who was in the dying days of Bellator, a championship level fighter. Also, I believe the romantic partner of Tatiana Suarez, if I'm not mistaken, Patchy Mix.
Oh yeah, I've forgotten about that.
Which those are two, they say opposites attract, but in terms of body type, those two seem like a perfect match.
Yeah.
Sort of thin-legged, boxy, gangly wrestlers.
Yeah. So, I guess Bautista, like we were talking about how, thin on the ground prospects are in the modern UFC.
Yeah.
Partially because, I think we didn't really mention this partially because, they horrifically lowball many of the people who want to come to the UFC and would be cool.
They just have no interest in actually acquiring young talent, or if they do, as you said, they're not willing to pay them what they know they're worth.
Yep. But and it's good to know that now they have like Mario Bautista, who's maybe it's his job just to gatekeep the UFC to ensure that it stays not fun.
Yeah.
Let's just have Merab Dvalishvili, and let's not mince words here or be inaccurate, stinky loser who sucks. Try and stop Patchy Mix, who's actually genuinely pretty exciting.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be the grounded realist, clearly, in this discussion, who says that Mario Bautista is himself a very exciting, interesting fighter.
He might have been once upon a time.
And all of that boiled away in the space of 1 round against Jose Aldo. He's completely, it's a concession. He'll never get that back. Now that he had a little too much respect for Jose Aldo and felt that he had to play it safe against him.
In a fight he wasn't even winning.
I mean, Mario Bautista is an aggressive, well-rounded fighter who, aside from that, tends to be at his utmost best in the third round of a fight.
Mm-hmm.
The Jose Aldo fight is, I hate to say it, a significant outlier, which it was like tracking like a Bautista fight, a typical Mario Bautista fight, until Aldo like summoned the will to start fighting back and convinced Bautista that he had to do something else. Maybe that's been under the surface the whole time, and that's why Bautista's fights do tend to incorporate more and more offensive wrestling. I've always taken that as he's a guy who starts to break people and then decides to break them everywhere. But maybe the flip side of that is that he doesn't really have all the ideas or the depth in one phase to continue dominating there. And so he has to expand late in the fight.
Yep.
But, I think he's a pretty stiff test for Patchy Mix. They've certainly not given Patchy a walkover for his UFC debut.
No.
Tell me about Patchy Mix's game then. What is he going to be trying to do to Mario Bautista?
So he's got the kind of game that I don't normally expect to have the kind of success that it does.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a sort of medium-paced, long-range kickboxer. He's incredibly potent on the ground. He does like work off his jab a lot, which as a southpaw confuses a lot of people, frankly.
Yes.
He's a very lead hand heavy. His game construction isn't actually that dissimilar to Umar Nurmagomedov's, but it's just a much more. It feels just much less polished but perhaps even more dynamic.
Much more weighted towards the grappling, but with good reason, right? His grappling is very dangerous in a way that Umar's is not necessarily.
Yeah. But yeah, he's clearly he doesn't have a very varied game on the feet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he has good timing, and he's happy to just take what he can on the feet, which makes him a lot more effective as a long fighter with an unconventional stance.
Mm-hmm.
That he will just jab people up moving backwards, which is just, he's not doing anything super creative, but just like most MMA fighters just aren't doing that. Once they're moving backwards, they're just running away, basically.
Yeah, it's a thing a lot of MMA fighters could learn is that you actually don't have to be all that creative much of the time. Maybe don't think you have to have 4 wacky tricks that the guy won't be prepared for if the one move is going to keep working consistently. Obviously, it helps that Mix is big, so keeping people at range with his jab is more effective for him than it would be for others, especially because it's not like he's showing particularly good defensive footwork.
Nope.
With this jab, he's just retreating and pumping it out, but it totally flummoxes a lot of opponents. All of them, in fact. I do wonder, that'll be effective to some extent. What does Patchy Mix look like, supposing that Mario Bautista comes in determined to pressure him? This is not a thing that tends to happen to Patchy Mix. Most of his opponents kind of allow him to have the center of the cage and allow him to cut it off and slowly pressure in. And, in part that is because when they do try to strike at him, as you said, he'll just kind of shuffle back and stick that southpaw jab in their face. But that's not an unsolvable problem. And I don't think it in particular should be an unsolvable problem for Mario Bautista. I guess I don't have a great idea of how he handles a southpaw jab, but I know he can come in behind his own jab and slip a jab and come back with a counter and cover distance that way pretty effectively. And while keeping his feet in a better position than the likes of, say, Kyoji Horiguchi, who tends to, sell out on big bombs and then has to get back to long range all over again.
Yeah.
So I am curious, if Mario Bautista puts some concerted pressure on Patchy Mix, how does Patchy's game function?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I don't really like Patchy Mix. He doesn't look like a super functional style archetype to me. Again, like, this may seem hypocritical because I've been singing Umar Nurmagomedov's praises a lot, but Umar has better footwork. He's just a more coherent striker. You can see that he's building from his southpaw jab into more things.
Yeah.
Whereas Patchy Mitch is mostly on the feet. He's just consistently annoying people.
Yeah. Umar has a whole ass striking game.
Yeah.
He can just convincingly win fights on the feet, showing depth of striking skill.
If you can do that against Corey Sandhagen, you are very good.
Absolutely.
I do not think Patchy Mix could beat Corey Sandhagen in a kickboxing bout.
No, I do not either. Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a big unknown to me. This is one of those matchups where I don't think Patchy Mix has been tested in the way that I at least hope Bautista will test him. I mean, this could be a fight where Bautista also reasons that it's not particularly fun or pleasant to pressure this guy. I mean, I certainly expect, this tends to be the case, I certainly expect him not to be that overwhelmingly aggressive in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's a bit of a death sentence. Maybe being made uncomfortable on the end of this big fighter's long reach, having him counter you with that sneaky right hook that he likes to throw when you do you can overcommit because you haven't got a sense of the range yet, and then maybe you shoot and then you go into a whole fucking front headlock series where Mix is really, really dangerous. Like, it's not just a guillotine threat, but also the threat of all the sweeps that come out of that. And then he's on top of you. Maybe a slow start doesn't look like it's a thing that usually works out for Patchy's opponents thus far.
Yeah.
But, yeah, go
on. The other thing that has typically been, I think, the case for people who have come from Bellator over to the UFC, for whatever reasons, is that presumably it is just because the UFC is a more concentrated group of the best fighters in the world, is that people often do tend to come along and then realize that, the people in the UFC are by and large just simply bigger than they used to be, than they are in Bellator. Like, the weight cutting paradigm is simply pushed a bit further. And I don't think that's because, the fighters are different and there's a UFC, it's just a UFC class of fighter. It's simply, that you just tend to, within deep competitive divisions, just being really big tends to
absolutely
be a strong survival factor.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things I find myself wondering about, Patchy Mix, for example, because, these are not big bantamweights he's beating up, and hence a game where he's able to retreat and hide behind his jab and, can get people to overcommit. I mean, Sergio Pettis.
Right.
Magomed Magomedov is reasonably sized. Kyoji Horiguchi, we're talking sort of flyweight, bantamweight tweeners.
Mm-hmm.
Mario Bautista is not as big as Patchy Mix, but he is big.
Yep.
He's a 5'9" bantamweight.
Yep. He actually has, this won't feel like a reach advantage because he's shorter, but he does have a half inch of wingspan on Patchy Mix, and he is a well-built, powerful bantamweight.
Yeah. And so that is, I think, why I'm probably going to pick him, because, I'm not sure I fully believe in Patchy Mix's game, as fun as it is.
Yeah.
And I think that it is, in some ways, just simply built on him being able to being bigger than his opponents.
That's kind of how
he's going to find that it's not necessarily going to be the case. I'm going to pick Bautista to, hold him up against the fence or whatever he does.
That's kind of how I feel too. I think that, the other thing is just that Bautista is concertedly aggressive. Typically, that is, in a way that none of these opponents of Patchy Mix have been. Sergio Pettis, as you said, a small bantamweight who chose to operate against Patchy Mix like off the back foot and allowed him to control the space of the cage. Kyoji Horiguchi, different style, same basic parameters. Floating around at long range, allowing Patchy Mix to kind of stay comfortable, and coming in from so far that Mix was actually able to counter him somewhat comfortably. But I just get the feeling that Mix is in a position right now of having dominated with what is overall a kind of inflexible game.
Mm-hmm.
With not a ton of depth to it. And I think Bautista is definitely a fighter who demands depth of skill set from his opponents.
Yep.
He is going to bring an aggressive approach that adapts as the fight goes on, even if sometimes just by becoming even more aggressive, and also is capable of testing his opponents everywhere the fight goes. Maybe not overwhelmingly great in all those areas, but willing and aggressive in all of them. I still remember that the fights he had with Damon Blackshear and Ricky Simone, which started kind of indecisive, then became fights where he was piling on pressure and drawing shots out and punishing them, and ended as fights where he was beating those guys up against the cage and dropping them with timely takedown attempts. I've never seen Patchy Mix face somebody who really matches that description at all, who is also, as you point out, a good-sized, powerful, fast athlete for the division. So, part of me, not for the same reasons as you, part of me hopes I'm wrong, because as we said last week, bantamweight is currently feeling a little starved for mobile ranked fighters. It's feeling a little welterweighty at the moment, which is not something I'm comfortable saying about this, just permanently great division. So I would like to have Patchy Mix in the mix, so to speak, as a contender. And I'm sure he still will be, even if he falls flat here. But I don't know. I just kind of feel like he actually does have something to prove from my perspective. I'm not really sold on, how comprehensively he can beat the bigger across the board and generally very well-rounded and very physically fit fighters that the UFC bantamweight division has to offer.
Yeah, I tend to agree. But yeah, it just does seem bizarre as why you would set him up with Bautista.
He's a sport killer, this Bautista. He's gonna suck all the air out of the fucking arena, isn't he?
Piece of shit.
Who would you match Patchy Mix with? As a UFC debut?
I don't know, actually. Let me think about that. I'd probably just someone like just Chito Vera or whatever.
Chito Vera makes a lot of sense. That's a dangerous testing opponent, but somebody that...
It's just an IQ. It's an IQ and physicality test.
Absolutely. Yeah. Somebody with a much more solvable game, I think, than Bautista.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or you pick another time, you maybe, now that he's lost, you give him Figueiredo. Obviously that can't happen now, but somebody in that kind of position, even somebody like Rob Font, somebody who's going to test him, but is definitely susceptible to what Patchy does. Yeah. I don't know. Seems like a strange choice. Even if you Bautista completely soured himself for you, you got to acknowledge he's a tough nut to crack.
Yep.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to it. I am definitely glad to have Patchy Mix in this division, which needs fighters like him. We will see how it goes. And that's about it. That's at least for us as far as UFC 316 is concerned. So we'll be back next week to talk about all that happened. We will, of course, also be looking ahead to Kamaru Usman versus Joaquin Buckley.
Oh.
Glue factory fight, say what you will about it, but Michael Morales is making his bid for Employee of the Year, but not if Joaquin Buckley has anything to say about it.
Yeah, say what you like about Joaquin Buckley. Like, that man does not rest on his laurels.
Definitely not. He's like, there are still some old bones to be ground up in this division. And I know my work better than anyone else, goddammit. So that's for next week. Until then, find us on the social medias. At Boxing Bush is me on Twitter. At Evil Greg Jackson is Phil. You can find me on Blue Sky at King Typo. I don't have anything planned right now. I've got a busy weekend ahead of me, but I will be striving to put out something after UFC 316 on my Substack, facepunching.substack.com. Also, if you haven't heard it already, I did record 2 episodes of our Sumo podcast for the Heavy Hands Patreon with Miguel Class. We have our second new grand champion in the sport of sumo was decided in this last tournament. So you can hear us talking about all 15 days of that tournament in exhaustive depth, really. And you might also hear a little bit of useless chatter recorded at the top of today's episode this week as well at patreon.com/heavyhands. Until next week, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.